The security breach alarm screamed through the Pentagon Cyber Defense Division as Sarah Chen sat in her cramped cubicle responding to password reset requests. But when the military's most classified network fell to an unknown hacker in under 6 minutes, the same colleagues who had mocked her glorified IT support role watched in stunned silence as she cracked her knuckles and said quietly, "I've seen this attack pattern before." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Sarah Chen arrived at the Pentagon Cyber Defense Division at 7:15 a.m. every morning. Her worn canvas messenger bag slung over her shoulder and a large coffee clutched in her right hand. At 29, she was unremarkable in every way that mattered to her colleagues: average height, shoulder-length black hair usually tied back in a simple ponytail, and clothes that screamed budget shopping. Her government-issued badge read, Sarah Chen, Technical Support Specialist, Level 2, which in the hierarchy of the Pentagon's cyber operations might as well have been a scarlet letter. The Cyber Defense Division occupied 3 floors of one of the Pentagon's most secure wings, where the nation's brightest minds worked around the clock to protect America's digital infrastructure from foreign threats. It was a world of million-dollar servers, classified algorithms, and personnel with security clearances so high they couldn't even tell their spouses what they did for work. In this environment of technological elites, Sarah's role as a Level 2 technical support specialist placed her firmly at the bottom of the food chain. Her cubicle sat in the corner of the 3rd floor, squeezed between the printer repair station and the supply closet. The space was barely 6 feet by 6 feet, furnished with a standard government-issued desk, a single monitor that had seen better days, and a phone that rang constantly with mundane requests: password resets, software installations, basic troubleshooting. These were the bread and butter of Sarah's daily existence, while her colleagues worked on cutting-edge cybersecurity projects with names like Operation Digital Fortress and Project Quantum Shield. Sarah dealt with Dr. Morrison from the Intelligence Division, who had forgotten his password for the 3rd time this month. The morning routine was always the same. Sarah would boot up her computer, check her queue of overnight support tickets, and begin the methodical process of solving other people's basic technical problems. Her responses were always professional, concise, and effective. She could diagnose most issues within minutes and provide solutions that were both immediate and long-lasting. But efficiency in password resets and software troubleshooting didn't earn respect in a division where people wrote code that could bring down entire foreign networks. The physical layout of the office itself served as a constant reminder of the hierarchy. The 1st floor housed the division's leadership, directors, deputy directors, and senior analysts who made decisions that affected national security. The 2nd floor was home to the elite cyber warfare specialists, the digital soldiers who launched offensive operations against hostile nations. These were the people who appeared in classified briefings, whose work was so sensitive that even mentioning it required special permission. The 3rd floor, where Sarah worked, was designated for support staff, analysts, and what the upper floors euphemistically called essential personnel. Sarah's desk was positioned so that she could see the elevator banks, which meant she had a front row seat to the daily parade of important people heading to important meetings. She watched as teams of specialists in expensive suits carried tablets and secure phones, their conversations peppered with technical jargon and classified project names. They moved with the confidence of people who knew their work mattered, who understood that their decisions could affect global politics and national security. The contrast was stark and deliberate. While the upper floors featured modern workstations with multiple monitors, ergonomic chairs, and the latest hardware, the 3rd floor made do with equipment that was functional but uninspiring. The message was clear: some people were trusted with the important work, while others were there to keep the lights on and the computers running. Sarah had learned to navigate this environment with quiet professionalism, but she wasn't blind to the subtle ways the hierarchy reinforced itself. Her co-workers on the third floor were a mix of administrative staff, junior analysts, and various support personnel. Most were friendly enough, but there was an unspoken understanding that they were all part of the same category, necessary but not essential, skilled but not irreplaceable. Conversations during breaks often centered around complaints about workload, discussions of weekend plans, and the occasional grumbling about how the real cybersecurity work was happening on the floors above them. Sarah's background was known to her immediate supervisor and HR, but it wasn't something that came up in casual conversation. Her resume showed a bachelor's degree in computer science from a state university, followed by several years of work at various tech companies before joining the government. On paper, she looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a competent technical support specialist who had found stable employment in the federal system. Her performance reviews were consistently positive, noting her efficiency, professionalism, and ability to handle difficult users with patience and skill. What her colleagues didn't know was that Sarah's path to this cubicle had been anything but conventional. Her undergraduate degree had been earned while serving in the Army Reserve, where she had shown an unusual aptitude for digital forensics and network analysis. After graduation, she had been recruited for specialized training that didn't appear on any official transcript. The years between college and her current job were listed on her resume as contract work and consulting, which was technically accurate, but left out the part about working for organizations whose names were classified and whose missions were so sensitive that even acknowledging their existence required special authorization. The work environment of the Cyber Defense Division was designed to foster collaboration and innovation among its elite personnel, but these benefits rarely extended to the support staff. Sarah had access to the same cafeteria, the same break rooms, and the same fitness facilities as everyone else, but there were invisible boundaries that were rarely crossed. The specialists from the upper floors ate lunch together, discussing projects that Sarah wasn't cleared to know about. They attended briefings and training sessions that were off limits to support staff. They worked on teams that were assembled based on expertise and security clearance, not departmental hierarchy. Sarah's days were structured around solving problems for people who often treated her as an extension of their computer rather than a colleague. Phone calls would begin with phrases like, "I need you to fix this," or "the system isn't working again," rarely with pleasantries or acknowledgement that she was a person with her own expertise. Email requests were often terse and demanding, written with the assumption that her time was less valuable than theirs. When she provided solutions, the response was typically silence, no thank you, no acknowledgement that she had saved them time and frustration. The technical challenges she faced in her official role were straightforward, but required a broad knowledge of systems and software. The Pentagon's computer network was a complex ecosystem of classified and unclassified systems, each with its own security protocols and access requirements. Sarah had become expert at navigating this maze, understanding not just how to fix problems, but why they occurred and how to prevent them in the future. Her solutions were often more elegant and comprehensive than necessary, but she took pride in doing the work well even when no one noticed. Despite the limitations of her role, Sarah had developed a reputation for reliability among the people she supported. When Dr. Morrison called with his recurring password issues, he specifically asked for Sarah because he knew she would solve the problem quickly and without making him feel foolish. When the systems in the intelligence division experienced recurring software glitches, the request would come with a note asking for Sarah's attention because previous technicians had only provided temporary fixes. These small acknowledgments of her competence provided some satisfaction, but they also highlighted the narrow scope of what she was allowed to contribute. The security protocols that governed Sarah's work were extensive and strictly enforced. Every action she took was logged and monitored. Every system she accessed left a digital fingerprint that could be traced and audited. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was surrounded by some of the most sophisticated cybersecurity infrastructure in the world, but her job was to help people who couldn't remember their passwords or install software updates. She was like a master chef working as a short-order cook, capable of creating elaborate dishes but limited to flipping burgers and making coffee. Her cubicle had become a small sanctuary where she could work efficiently without the constant reminder of her place in the hierarchy. She had personalized the space with a small plant, a coffee mug from her alma mater, and a few technical manuals that she consulted when solving particularly complex problems. The walls were bare, except for a printed schedule of system maintenance windows and a list of frequently used phone extensions. It was functional and professional, revealing nothing about her personality or background. Beyond what was necessary for her job, the routine of her work had become almost meditative. Each morning brought a fresh batch of problems to solve, each with its own small satisfaction upon completion. She had developed efficient workflows for common issues, created templates for frequently needed solutions, and built relationships with key personnel who could help expedite resolutions. Within the constraints of her role, she had found ways to excel and contribute, even if that contribution was invisible to most of the people around her. Sarah's lunch breaks were typically spent alone, either reading technical journals or taking walks around the Pentagon's corridors. She had learned the building's layout thoroughly, knowing which routes were fastest for different destinations and which areas were restricted to personnel with higher clearances. The building itself was a monument to American military power. But for Sarah, it had become simply the place where she worked, as familiar and routine as any office building. The afternoon of what would become known as Black Wednesday started like any other. Sarah's queue contained the usual mix of password resets, software installation requests, and hardware troubleshooting tickets. She worked through them methodically, providing solutions and documentation that would help prevent similar issues in the future. The rhythm of her work was interrupted only by the occasional phone call or email asking for clarification on a previous fixed dot. As the day progressed, Sarah noticed an unusual pattern in some of the support requests. Several users from different departments were reporting similar connectivity issues, and the error messages they described suggested something more systematic than routine technical problems. She made notes in her tracking system, flagging the mundane pattern for potential follow-up, but her role didn't include proactive system monitoring or analysis. That responsibility belonged to the network specialists on the upper floors. The calm efficiency of her routine was about to be shattered by events that would force everyone in the Cyber Defense Division to reevaluate their assumptions about capability, hierarchy, and the true nature of the quiet woman who had been solving their password problems for 3 years. The mockery began during the 9:30 a.m. staff meeting when Division Chief Anderson announced the morning's assignments. Sarah sat in the back row of the conference room, her notebook balanced on her lap as she took notes on system maintenance schedules and upcoming security updates. The room was filled with the division's key personnel, senior analysts, cybersecurity specialists, and project managers who worked on classified operations that Sarah wasn't cleared to know about. Technical support will continue handling routine user issues, Anderson announced, his tone suggesting that this was the least important item on his agenda. Password resets, software installations, the usual hand-holding for people who can't figure out how to use their computers. A few chuckles rippled through the room, and Sarah felt the familiar sting of being dismissed as part of the furniture rather than a professional colleague. Marcus Webb, a senior cybersecurity analyst who had joined the division 6 months earlier, raised his hand. "Sir, I've been thinking about efficiency improvements. Maybe we could implement an automated system for password resets." Seems like we're wasting human resources on tasks that could be handled by a simple script. His suggestion was met with approving nods from several colleagues, as if the idea of eliminating the need for people like Sarah was both obvious and overdue. That's the kind of forward thinking we need, Anderson replied, making a note on his tablet. Webb, why don't you put together a proposal for automating Level 2 support functions? We could probably reduce our technical support staff by half. If we implemented the right systems. The comment landed like a punch to Sarah's stomach, but she kept her expression neutral and continued taking notes, as if her job security wasn't being casually discussed in front of her. After the meeting, Sarah returned to her cubicle to find a new batch of support tickets waiting in her queue. The first was from Dr. Jennifer Hayes in the Strategic Analysis Division, who had somehow managed to corrupt her email client while trying to install a browser plugin. The ticket was marked urgent and included a note that Dr. Hayes had an important meetings that required immediate attention. Sarah sighed and dialed the extension, preparing herself for what was likely to be a frustrating conversation with someone who considered technical problems beneath her pay grade. "This is Dr. Hayes," came the crisp voice on the other end of the line. "Dr. Hayes, this is Sarah Chen from technical support. I'm calling about your email client issue. I can walk you through the repair process, or I can remote in and fix it directly if you prefer." There was a pause followed by an audible sigh. "Look, Sarah, I don't have time for a tutorial. Can't you just wave your magic wand and make it work? I have a briefing with the deputy director in an hour, and I need access to my classified correspondence." Sarah had learned to navigate these conversations with patience and professionalism, even when the underlying message was that her time was less valuable than theirs. "Of course, Dr. Hayes. I'll remote in and have this resolved within 10 minutes. You won't need to do anything on your end." Finally, someone who understands priorities, Dr. Hayes muttered before hanging up. The repair was straightforward. A corrupted registry entry that Sarah fixed in under 5 minutes. She also took the time to update Dr. Hayes' browser plugins and run a quick security scan, finding and removing several pieces of malware that had been quietly collecting system information. Sarah documented the additional work in her ticket notes, knowing that Dr. Hayes would never know about the security threats she had just eliminated. 20 minutes later, Sarah overheard a conversation between Webb and his colleague Thomas Chen. No relation, despite sharing a surname. They were standing near the printer, speaking in voices just loud enough to be heard throughout the nearby cubicles. "I swear, these support people are like digital janitors," Webb was saying with obvious amusement. "They mop up other people's messes but don't really understand what they're cleaning up." Sarah fixed Hayes' email, but I guarantee she has no idea that Hayes is working on the North Korean network infiltration project. Thomas laughed. "That's probably for the best. Can you imagine if people like Sarah had access to classified operations? She'd probably accidentally email our attack plans to Beijing while trying to reset someone's password." The conversation continued as they walked away, but Sarah had heard enough. She returned to her work, processing the sting of being compared to a janitor, while simultaneously being told she was too incompetent to handle important work. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had just removed malware from Dr. Hayes' computer. That could have compromised whatever classified project she was working on. But that competence was invisible to the people, who made jokes about her abilities. The lunch break brought no relief from the casual dismissal that had become part of her daily routine. Sarah sat alone in the cafeteria, eating a sandwich while reading a technical journal about advanced persistent threats in government networks. At the table next to her, a group of analysts from the second floor were discussing their latest project, something involving cryptocurrency tracking and international money laundering. Their conversation was animated and passionate, the kind of discussion that happens when people are engaged in work they find meaningful and important. The thing about financial network analysis, one of them was saying, is that you need to understand not just the technical side, but the human psychology. Criminals make patterns, and if you can identify those patterns, you can predict their next moves. Sarah found herself nodding along with the analysis, recognizing the sophisticated understanding of network behavior that the analyst was describing. She had encountered similar patterns in her previous work, but that experience wasn't something she could share without revealing information that was supposed to remain classified. As she listened, Webb approached the table and inserted himself into the conversation. "You know what's funny?" he said, gesturing toward Sarah's table. "We're sitting here talking about advanced network analysis, and right over there is someone whose biggest challenge today was probably figuring out why someone's printer wasn't working." The group glanced over at Sarah, who pretended to be absorbed in her journal while listening to every word. One of the analysts, a woman named Dr. Lisa Park, looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Come on, Marcus. Support staff are important too. We'd be lost without them." "I'm not saying they're not important," Webb replied, raising his hands in mock defense. "I'm just saying there are different levels of importance. Sarah's job is to turn things off and on again. Our job is to protect national security. There's a difference." The comment drew a few uncomfortable laughs from the group, but Sarah could see that Dr. Park wasn't amused. She had worked with Sarah on several technical issues and had always been professional and respectful. But even Dr. Park's discomfort couldn't change the fundamental dynamic. Sarah was seen as support staff, not as a colleague with expertise that might be relevant to their work. After lunch, Sarah returned to her cubicle to find that someone had left a printed joke article on her desk. The headline read, "Top 10 Signs You're Overqualified for Your Job," and included items like, "You can fix problems in your sleep, and people assume you're magic because you can make computers work." The article was clearly meant to be lighthearted, but it felt like another reminder that her colleagues saw her as a technician rather than a professional. The afternoon brought a steady stream of routine support requests, each one reinforcing the perception that Sarah's role was limited to solving other people's basic technical problems. A request to help someone configure their email client led to a conversation where the user repeatedly asked if Sarah was sure about the settings, as if her 3 years of experience with the Pentagon's email system was somehow less reliable. Then their 5 minutes of random clicking. Another call came from the administrative division, where someone had managed to install unauthorized software that was causing system conflicts. As Sarah worked to remove the problematic programs, the user explained that they had been trying to install games to play during their lunch break. Sarah bit back the urge to explain that installing unauthorized software on government computers was a serious security violation that could result in disciplinary action. Instead, she focused on cleaning up the system and documenting the incident for the security team to review. The casual dismissal extended beyond individual interactions to the broader culture of the division. When technical briefings were held, support staff weren't invited. When new security protocols were implemented, they received a summary document rather than the detailed explanation that was provided to analysts and specialists. When equipment upgrades were distributed, support staff received whatever was left over after the important personnel had been taken care of. Sarah had adapted to this environment by focusing on the quality of her work rather than the recognition she received for it. Each problem she solved was an opportunity to demonstrate competence and professionalism, even if that demonstration was largely invisible to the people around her. She had developed a reputation for reliability among the users she supported, but that reputation didn't translate into respect from her colleagues or opportunities for advancement. The technical challenges she faced were often more complex than they appeared on the surface. A simple password reset might reveal underlying security issues that required careful analysis and documentation. A software installation request might uncover network vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed before they could be exploited. Sarah had learned to identify these broader implications while staying within the boundaries of her official role, providing solutions that were both immediate and comprehensive. By late afternoon, Sarah had processed 37 support tickets, solved 12 complex technical problems, and prevented at least 3 potential security breaches through her routine maintenance work. She had done this while enduring jokes about her competence, assumptions about her intelligence, and casual dismissal of her professional contributions. The irony was that her work had likely done more to protect the division's network security than some of the high-profile projects that received all the attention and resources. As the day wound down, Sarah began her routine of updating ticket documentation and preparing status reports for the next shift. The process was methodical and thorough, reflecting her understanding that good documentation was essential for maintaining system stability and security. Each ticket included not just the solution she had provided, but also her analysis of the underlying cause and recommendations for preventing similar issues in the future. The office began to empty as personnel headed home for the evening, but Sarah remained at her desk, finishing her documentation and preparing for the next day's challenges. She had learned to find satisfaction in the work itself, rather than in the recognition or respect that seemed to be reserved for other people. Tomorrow would bring another batch of technical problems to solve, another day of being treated as support staff rather than as a professional colleague. The quiet efficiency of her routine masked a deeper truth that none of her colleagues suspected, that Sarah Chen was far more than she appeared to be, and that the skills they dismissed as technical support were actually the foundation of expertise that ran much deeper than anyone imagined. The mockery and dismissal that had become part of her daily experience were about to be revealed as profound misjudgments. But for now, Sarah simply focused on doing her job well and waiting for the moment when her true capabilities would be needed. The first sign that Sarah Chen possessed skills beyond routine technical support appeared during a routine server maintenance window on a Tuesday evening in March. The Cyber Defense Division's primary authentication server had been scheduled for a critical security update, but the installation had failed catastrophically, leaving half the division unable to access their workstations. The senior systems administrator, Robert Kim, had been working on the problem for 3 hours when Sarah quietly approached his desk. "Mr. Kim, I noticed the authentication errors in my support queue," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The failure pattern suggests a registry corruption in the security certificate chain. If you modify the installation sequence to bypass the automated certificate validation, you might be able to complete the update manually." Kim looked up from his screen, irritation flashing across his face. "Sarah, I appreciate the suggestion, but this is a complex enterprise-level problem. It's not the same as helping someone reset their password." Sarah nodded politely and returned to her cubicle, but she had been right. 2 hours later, Kim discovered that the installation had indeed failed due to a corrupted security certificate, and the solution was exactly what Sarah had suggested. He implemented her recommendation and had the server fully operational within 30 minutes. But he never mentioned Sarah's contribution in his incident report. The pattern repeated itself throughout the spring. During a network connectivity crisis that left the intelligence division isolated from the main system, Sarah identified the root cause as a misconfigured routing table that was causing packets to loop indefinitely. She mentioned her analysis to the network engineer assigned to the problem, who dismissed her input as oversimplified, before spending 6 hours discovering that she had been correct. When the division's secure email system began experiencing random encryption failures, Sarah recognized the symptoms as indicative of a timing attack against the cryptographic protocols. She documented her findings and submitted them through proper channels, but the report was filed under routine technical observations and ignored until an external security Audit confirmed her analysis 3 weeks later. Sarah's troubleshooting approach was methodical and comprehensive in ways that her colleagues didn't recognize or appreciate. When Dr. Morrison called with his recurring password issues, Sarah didn't just reset his credentials. She analyzed his usage patterns, identified the applications that were causing his authentication to expire prematurely, and reconfigured his system to prevent future lockouts. The solution was elegant and permanent, but Dr. Morrison only noticed that his password problems had stopped occurring. Her understanding of the division's network architecture was encyclopedic. During her 3 years of providing technical support, Sarah had gained access to virtually every system in the facility, from classified research terminals to administrative workstations. Each support request had given her insight into different aspects of the network's design, security protocols, and operational procedures. She had assembled this knowledge into a comprehensive, mental map of the division's digital infrastructure that was more detailed than any official documentation. That the division's network topology was complex and compartmentalized, with multiple security levels and access controls designed to prevent unauthorized access to classified information. Sarah's support role had required her to understand these systems well enough to troubleshoot problems without compromising security protocols. She had learned to navigate the maze of permissions and restrictions with an efficiency that impressed even the security administrators, though they attributed her competence to routine familiarity rather than genuine expertise. Her technical skills extended far beyond the basic troubleshooting that defined her official duties. Sarah had developed custom diagnostic tools that could identify network anomalies in real time, scripts that automated complex system maintenance tasks, and monitoring protocols that detected security vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. She used these tools discreetly, incorporating their insights into her support work without drawing attention to their sophistication. The most telling example of Sarah's hidden capabilities came during a routine malware incident in the Strategic Analysis Division. Dr. Jennifer Hayes had contacted technical support about unusual system behavior, slow performance, unexpected network activity, and applications that crashed without warning. The incident was assigned to Sarah as a routine malware removal, but her analysis revealed something far more serious than a simple virus infection. The malware was sophisticated, using advanced evasion techniques and encrypted communications to avoid detection by standard security tools. Sarah recognized the code structure as consistent with state-sponsored cyber warfare tools, the kind of advanced persistent threat that was typically handled by elite cybersecurity specialists. She documented her findings in detail, including the malware's communication protocols, its data exfiltration methods, and its attempts to establish persistent access to the network. Her report was comprehensive and technically precise, identifying not just the immediate threat, but also the potential scope of the compromise and the steps needed to prevent reinfection. The analysis demonstrated a level of expertise in malware forensics that was typically found only among senior cybersecurity professionals, but it was filed as a routine incident report and processed through standard channels. The security team eventually confirmed Sarah's analysis and implemented her recommendations, but they assumed the technical details had been provided by their own specialists, rather than by the Level 2 support technician who had first identified the threat. Sarah's name appeared in the incident documentation as the person who had reported unusual system behavior, while the credit for the sophisticated analysis went to personnel who had simply validated her findings. Sarah's approach to network security was proactive and holistic. While her official role focused on reactive problem-solving, she had developed an understanding of the division's threat landscape that allowed her to identify potential vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. She monitored network traffic patterns, analyzed system logs for anomalies, and tracked the digital fingerprints of routine user activities to establish baselines that could reveal unauthorized access attempts. Her cubicle had become an informal intelligence center, where she tracked dozens of potential security issues that never reached the attention of the official cybersecurity teams. Sarah maintained detailed logs of unusual network activity, documented recurring system vulnerabilities, and monitored the effectiveness of security protocols across the division's infrastructure. This information was invaluable for maintaining network security, but it remained invisible to her colleagues, who saw only the routine support requests that appeared in her official queue. The division's security protocols were designed to prevent unauthorized access to classified information, but they also created blind spots that Sarah had learned to identify and monitor. Her support role gave her legitimate access to systems across all security levels, allowing her to observe patterns and anomalies that would be invisible to specialists focused on specific areas of the network. She had become an inadvertent surveillance system for the division's digital infrastructure, capable of detecting threats that more focused security measures might miss. Her technical documentation was extraordinarily detailed and precise, reflecting not just her understanding of immediate problems, but also her analysis of underlying system vulnerabilities and potential improvements. Each support ticket included comprehensive diagnostic information, step-by-step solution procedures, and recommendations for preventing similar issues in the future. The documentation was far more thorough than required for routine technical support, but it provided invaluable intelligence about the division's operational security posture. Sarah's knowledge of the division's personnel and their digital habits was comprehensive and current. 3 years of providing technical support had given her insight into the work patterns, security practices, and system usage of virtually every person in the facility. She knew which users were likely to fall for phishing attempts, which systems were most vulnerable to social engineering attacks, and which security protocols were being ignored or circumvented by personnel who found them inconvenient. This human intelligence was as valuable as her technical expertise, but it remained largely unrecognized by the division's leadership. Sarah's understanding of the intersection between human behavior and cybersecurity was sophisticated and nuanced, reflecting her recognition that most security breaches resulted from human error rather than technical vulnerabilities. She had developed strategies for addressing these human factors through improved training, better system design, and more effective security protocols. The irony of her situation was that Sarah's daily work provided her with better intelligence about the division's security posture than was available to most of the senior analysts who worked on classified cybersecurity projects. Her routine interactions with users across all levels of the organization gave her insights into operational security that were invisible to specialists who worked within compartmentalized security clearances and restricted access protocols. Her problem-solving methodology was systematic and thorough, reflecting training and experience that extended far beyond standard technical support procedures. Sarah approached each issue with the assumption that visible symptoms might indicate deeper underlying problems, leading her to conduct comprehensive analyses that often revealed security vulnerabilities or system weaknesses that had been previously undetected. The division's network infrastructure was constantly evolving, with new systems, updated security protocols, and changing operational requirements that created ongoing challenges for maintaining security and functionality. Sarah had adapted to this environment by developing a deep understanding of how different systems interacted, how security protocols affected user productivity, and how operational changes might create new vulnerabilities or opportunities for improvement. Her unofficial role as the division's institutional memory for technical issues had made her an invaluable resource for maintaining system stability and security. Sarah remembered every significant technical problem that had occurred during her tenure, understood the solutions that had been implemented, and could predict which issues were likely to recur based on changing operational requirements or system configurations. The quiet competence that Sarah demonstrated in her routine work was actually the visible manifestation of expertise that ran much deeper than anyone suspected. Her colleagues saw efficiency and reliability in her technical support, but they missed the sophisticated analysis, proactive security monitoring, and comprehensive understanding of network architecture that made her efficiency possible. The skills they dismissed as basic technical support were actually the foundation of cybersecurity, expertise that would soon prove to be far more valuable than anyone imagined. Colonel David Martinez had been observing the cyber defense division's operations for 3 weeks, and something about the quiet woman in the corner cubicle was bothering him. At 52, Martinez had spent 30 years in military intelligence, with the last decade focused on cybersecurity and digital warfare. He had been brought in to conduct a comprehensive security assessment of the Pentagon's cyber operations, a review that was long overdue given the increasing sophistication of foreign threats against American digital infrastructure. His temporary office was positioned on the 2nd floor with a clear view of the 3rd floor workspace, and he had developed a habit of watching the division's daily operations during his breaks. Most of the personnel moved through their routines, with the predictable patterns of government employees: coffee breaks at regular intervals, lunch periods that stretched slightly longer than officially allowed, and the gradual slowdown that preceded the end of each workday. But Sarah Chen was different. Martinez had noticed that she arrived earlier than most of her colleagues and stayed later than required. Her movements were economical and purposeful, without the casual wandering or social interactions that characterized most of the support staff. She seemed to be constantly monitoring something: her computer screen, the network status displays, the general activity level of the division, with an awareness that reminded him of military personnel in active operational environments. During his first week of observation, Martinez had assumed that Sarah was simply a dedicated employee who took her technical support responsibilities seriously. But as he watched more carefully, he began to notice details that suggested something more complex. Her typing speed was extraordinary, far beyond what would be necessary for routine support tasks. Her body language while working showed the kind of focused intensity that he associated with analysts working on high-priority intelligence problems. Most tellingly, she seemed to be processing information at a rate that was inconsistent with simple technical troubleshooting. The turning point came during a network incident that occurred on a Thursday afternoon. A configuration error in one of the division's core routers had caused widespread connectivity problems throughout the facility. The senior network administrators had been working on the problem for over an hour, trying different solutions without success. Martinez watched as Sarah observed the situation from her cubicle, her attention focused not on her own work, but on the technical discussions happening around the network operations center. He saw her make several notes, reference something on her computer screen, and then quietly approach one of the network technicians. The conversation was brief and appeared to be dismissed by the technician, but Martinez noticed that Sarah's expression remained thoughtful rather than discouraged. She returned to her cubicle and continued monitoring the situation, occasionally making additional notes or checking different displays on her computer. 20 minutes later, the senior network administrator implemented a solution that resolved the connectivity problems. Martinez made a note to review the incident report when it was filed, curious about what solution had ultimately worked. When he read the report the following day, he was surprised to find that the successful approach was identical to what he had observed Sarah discussing with the technician an hour before the problem was resolved. This pattern of prescient technical insight became more apparent as Martinez continued his observation. During a security incident involving suspicious network traffic, Sarah had identified the source of the problem before the security specialists had even begun their analysis. When a critical server experienced performance issues that were affecting classified operations, Sarah's recommendations for resolution were documented in her support tickets before the server. Administrators had completed their diagnostic procedures. Martinez began to suspect that Sarah's technical competence was significantly more advanced than her job title suggested. He started reviewing her personnel file, looking for background information that might explain her apparent expertise. Her official resume was unremarkable, a computer science degree from a respected but not elite university, followed by several years of work in private sector technology companies before joining the government. Her performance evaluations were consistently positive, but focused on routine technical support metrics, rather than advanced analytical capabilities. The more Martinez observed, the more questions he developed about Sarah's true background and capabilities. Her situational awareness was extraordinarily acute, particularly for someone whose official duties should have required minimal attention to broader security issues. She seemed to monitor multiple information streams simultaneously, tracking not just her own support tickets, but also the general operational status of the division's network infrastructure. During a classified briefing on emerging cyber threats, Martinez noticed that Sarah was working at her cubicle with what appeared to be unusual intensity. The briefing was taking place in a secure conference room that was not visible from the third floor, but Sarah's work pattern suggested that she was aware of the meeting and possibly responding to its contents. When Martinez checked the division's support ticket system later that day, he found that Sarah had proactively addressed several potential security vulnerabilities that had been discussed during the classified briefing. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. Either Sarah had access to classified information that should have been restricted to senior personnel, or she had developed the ability to anticipate security threats based on her analysis of routine technical issues. Both possibilities suggested capabilities that were far beyond what would be expected from a Level 2 technical support specialist. Martinez decided to test his suspicions by creating a scenario that would require advanced cybersecurity expertise to resolve. He arranged for a simulated phishing attack to be launched against a group of administrative personnel, using techniques that were sophisticated enough to fool standard security awareness training but detectable by someone with advanced knowledge of social engineering methods. The phishing emails were carefully crafted to appear legitimate, using information that could realistically have been obtained through open-source intelligence gathering. They were designed to trick recipients into clicking on malicious links that would download harmless tracking software, allowing the security team to identify which personnel were vulnerable to this type of attack. The exercise was officially classified as a security drill, with only senior cybersecurity specialists informed of its true nature. Martinez watched Sarah's response to the phishing simulation with intense interest. Within minutes of the emails being sent, she had identified them as malicious and begun taking steps to protect the division's network. Her response was immediate and comprehensive. She identified the attack vectors, analyzed the social engineering techniques being used, and implemented countermeasures that prevented the malicious software from being installed on any systems. More importantly, her analysis of the phishing attempt was technically sophisticated and strategically insightful. She correctly identified the attack as a simulation rather than a genuine threat, recognized the specific techniques being used to test personnel vulnerability, and predicted which users would be most likely to fall for the deception. Her response demonstrated expertise in advanced threat analysis that was typically found only among elite cybersecurity professionals. The phishing simulation had been designed to test the division's security awareness and response capabilities. But Sarah's performance had turned it into a demonstration of individual expertise that was far beyond what anyone had expected from technical support personnel. Martinez realized that he had discovered someone whose capabilities were significantly underutilized and potentially invaluable for the division's security operations. His investigation of Sarah's background became more thorough and systematic. He used his security clearance to access personnel records that were not available to standard supervisors, looking for any information that might explain her advanced capabilities. Her financial records showed no unusual income sources or unexplained expenditures. Her travel history was limited and consistent with someone who worked in a routine government position. Her social media presence was minimal and professional, revealing nothing about advanced technical skills or cybersecurity expertise. The absence of obvious explanations for Sarah's capabilities made Martinez even more curious about her true background. People didn't develop advanced cybersecurity skills through routine technical support work, and the level of expertise she had demonstrated required specialized training and operational experience that wasn't available through standard career paths. Martinez began to suspect that Sarah's unremarkable official background might be intentionally constructed to obscure a more complex history. Intelligence agencies and military special operations units often provided cover stories for personnel whose true backgrounds needed to remain classified. Sarah's technical competence, situational awareness, and analytical capabilities were consistent with someone who had received specialized training in cybersecurity operations. But her official resume contained no record of such training. The possibility that Sarah was operating under a cover identity raised significant questions about her presence in the Cyber Defense Division. If she was an undercover intelligence operative, her mission and objectives would be known only to a very small number of senior officials. If she was a former military specialist who had transitioned to civilian employment, her advanced skills would represent a valuable but underutilized resource for the division's security operations. Martinez's assessment of the division's overall security posture was being complicated by his growing awareness that one of the most capable cybersecurity professionals in the facility was working in a role that didn't utilize her expertise. The irony was stark. While senior analysts worked on classified projects designed to protect national security, someone with potentially superior capabilities was being limited to routine technical support tasks. His observations of Sarah's work patterns had revealed a level of professional competence that was rare even among elite cybersecurity specialists. Her ability to analyze complex technical problems, predict security vulnerabilities, and implement effective countermeasures suggested training and experience that was far beyond what her official position would require. The question was whether this expertise was being deliberately concealed or was simply unrecognized by the division's leadership. The security assessment that Martinez was conducting was designed to identify vulnerabilities in the division's cybersecurity operations. But his discovery of Sarah's capabilities had revealed a different type of problem: the potential misallocation of human resources that could compromise the division's effectiveness. If Sarah possessed advanced cybersecurity expertise that was being underutilized, the division was missing opportunities to strengthen its security posture and improve its operational capabilities. Martinez realized that his assessment would need to address not just technical vulnerabilities and procedural weaknesses, but also the question of whether the division was effectively utilizing all of its available human resources. The quiet woman in the corner cubicle might represent the division's most valuable cybersecurity asset, but her capabilities remained invisible to the people who made strategic decisions about personnel allocation and operational priorities. The crisis began at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, when the Pentagon's most secure classified network suddenly went dark. The system, known internally as CyberNet Alpha, contained some of the military's most sensitive operational intelligence, troop movements, classified communications, and strategic plans that could compromise national security if accessed by foreign adversaries. Within minutes, emergency protocols were activated throughout the Cyber Defense Division as senior analysts rushed to determine what had caused the catastrophic failure. Sarah was in the middle of helping Dr. Patricia Wells configure a new workstation when the first alerts began flashing across the division's monitoring systems. The classified network displays that lined the walls of the operations center showed cascading red warnings as system after system reported connectivity failures. The backup authentication servers were unresponsive. The primary data repositories were inaccessible, and the encrypted communication channels that connected the Pentagon to military installations worldwide had gone completely silent. Division. Chief Anderson's voice cut through the sudden chaos as he addressed the room from the Operations Center podium. We have a complete failure of Cyprate Alpha connectivity. All classified operations are suspended until further notice. Senior analysts report to your stations immediately. This is a code red security incident. The announcement sent a wave of urgent activity through the division as cybersecurity specialists abandoned their routine tasks and focused on the unprecedented crisis. Sarah watched the response unfold from her cubicle, her technical support duties suddenly irrelevant in the face of a system failure that threatened to paralyze military operations across the globe. The senior network administrators were already deep in diagnostic procedures, their screens filled with error messages and system logs that revealed the scope of the catastrophe. Every attempt to restore connectivity failed, and the backup systems that should have automatically activated remained stubbornly offline. The first hour of the crisis was marked by increasingly desperate attempts to identify the cause of the failure. Marcus Webb and his team of senior analysts worked frantically to trace the network disruption to its source, but their efforts were hampered by the fact that the diagnostic tools they needed were part of the same network that had failed. They were trying to analyze a system breakdown using tools that depended on the very systems that were no longer functioning. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Dr. Lisa Park, the division's lead network architect, had been pulled from a meeting to coordinate the response effort. Her expertise in network topology and security protocols made her the logical choice to lead the investigation. But even her advanced skills were proving inadequate against a failure that seemed to defy conventional analysis. The network hadn't just stopped working. It had failed in ways that suggested either catastrophic hardware failure or a sophisticated cyber attack. Colonel Martinez watched the crisis response from his temporary office, his security assessment suddenly taking on urgent practical importance. The failure of Cyprate Alpha represented exactly the kind of vulnerability that his review was designed to identify and address. But academic analysis was useless when the Pentagon's most critical communication systems were completely offline, potentially leaving military commanders around the world unable to access the intelligence they needed to make strategic decisions. Technical teams were following standard incident response procedures, but their efforts were being hampered by the unprecedented nature of the failure. Normal diagnostic protocols assumed that at least some network functionality would remain available to support troubleshooting efforts. The complete collapse of Cyprate Alpha had created a situation where the tools needed to identify the problem were themselves part of the problem. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of being a technical specialist in a facility where the most critical technical systems had failed completely. Her routine support duties had become irrelevant, but her understanding of the division's network architecture was potentially more valuable than ever. She had spent 3 years learning the intricacies of the Pentagon's digital infrastructure, gaining access to systems and documentation that few other personnel had seen comprehensively. As the crisis entered its second hour, the pressure on the technical teams was becoming intense. Military commanders from around the world were demanding explanations for why their secure communications had been severed without warning. Intelligence operations that depended on real-time data sharing were being compromised by the inability to access classified information systems. The failure of Cyprate Alpha was cascading into a broader crisis that threatened to impact military readiness on a global scale. Sarah's observations of the response effort revealed patterns that were invisible to the specialists, who were focused on their individual areas of expertise. The network administrators were treating the failure as a technical problem, while the security analysts were investigating it as a potential cyber attack. But Sarah could see that both approaches were missing something fundamental about the nature of the system failure. The diagnostic data that was being collected showed anomalies that were consistent with neither hardware failure nor external attack. The network had shut down in a sequence that suggested coordinated system responses rather than random failures. The backup systems had failed to activate not because they were damaged, but because they were interpreting the primary system failure as a security threat that required complete network isolation. Sarah realized that the network failure might be the result of an internal security protocol that had been triggered by unusual system activity. CyberNet Alpha was designed with multiple layers of automated security responses that could shut down the entire network if certain threat indicators were detected. The system was programmed to prioritize security over functionality, meaning that it would rather go completely offline than risk compromise by a sophisticated attack. Her analysis of the failure pattern suggested that the network shutdown had been initiated by the system's own security protocols rather than by external interference. Something had triggered the automated threat response mechanisms, causing the network to shut itself down as a protective measure. The problem wasn't that the system had been attacked. It was that the system had detected what it interpreted as an attack and had responded by severing all connections to prevent data compromise. The implications of this analysis were significant. If Sarah was correct, the network failure was actually a security feature working as designed, but triggered by something that the system had incorrectly identified as a threat. The solution wouldn't involve repairing damaged systems or defending against ongoing attacks. It would require identifying what had triggered the false alarm and convincing the security protocols to allow the network to restart. But Sarah's understanding of the situation was trapped by her position in the organizational hierarchy. She was a Level 2 technical support specialist, whose opinions on network security were unlikely to be taken seriously by the senior analysts who were leading the response effort. Her analysis, no matter how accurate, would be dismissed as uninformed speculation from someone who lacked the expertise to understand the complexity of the crisis. The third hour of the crisis brought increasingly desperate measures as the technical teams exhausted their standard troubleshooting procedures. Dr. Park had authorized the activation of emergency protocols that would normally require approval from senior Pentagon leadership. Hardware specialists were being flown in from military installations around the country to assist with the recovery effort. The possibility was being discussed that the network failure might require complete system rebuilding that could take weeks to complete. Sarah watched the escalating response with growing frustration. The specialists were pursuing increasingly complex solutions to what she believed was a relatively straightforward problem. Their expertise in advanced cybersecurity was actually hindering their ability to recognize that the network failure was the result of automated security measures rather than system damage or external attack. The pressure on the technical teams was intensifying as the crisis entered its fourth hour. Military operations around the world were being disrupted by the inability to access classified intelligence systems. Strategic planning was being compromised by the lack of secure communication channels. The failure of CyberNet Alpha was being reported to senior Pentagon leadership as a potential national security crisis that might require emergency congressional notification. Colonel Martinez had been monitoring the crisis response from his office, but his security assessment background was giving him a different perspective on the situation. The response effort was being conducted with the assumption that the network failure represented either technical malfunction or hostile action. But Martinez was beginning to suspect that the real problem might be organizational rather than technical. The division's most capable cybersecurity specialist was sitting in a cubicle taking routine support calls, while less qualified personnel struggled with a crisis that might be within her expertise to resolve. The decision to expand the crisis response came during the fourth hour when Division Chief Anderson authorized the activation of the Pentagon's emergency cybersecurity protocols. Additional specialists were being called in from the National Security Agency and the Department of Homeland Security. The crisis was being escalated to levels that would normally be reserved for active cyber warfare situations or catastrophic infrastructure failures. Sarah understood that the escalation was based on the assumption that CyberNet Alpha had suffered damage that was beyond the division's ability to repair. The senior analysts were preparing for the possibility that the network had been compromised by foreign adversaries or had suffered hardware failures that would require complete system replacement. Their response was appropriate for those scenarios, but Sarah believed that both assumptions were incorrect. Her analysis of the available diagnostic data suggested that the network systems were actually functioning normally, but were being held in a protective shutdown mode by automated security protocols. The solution would require accessing the security management systems that controlled the automated responses and convincing them to allow network restart. This was a complex procedure that required detailed knowledge of the security protocols and their override procedures, but it was far less catastrophic than the system rebuilding that was being contemplated. The irony of the situation was that Sarah possessed exactly the expertise needed to resolve the crisis, but her position in the organizational hierarchy made it impossible for her to contribute to the solution. She had spent 3 years studying the Pentagon's network security protocols as part of her support duties, gaining detailed knowledge of systems that most senior analysts understood only in general terms. Her comprehensive understanding of the network architecture and security procedures made her uniquely qualified to diagnose and resolve the current crisis. But the same organizational structure that had dismissed her technical insights during routine operations was now preventing her from contributing to the resolution of a crisis that threatened national security. The senior analysts who were leading the response effort were operating within their areas of specialized expertise, but they lacked the comprehensive understanding of the network's integrated systems that Sarah had developed through her support work. As the crisis approached its fifth hour, Sarah realized that the situation was about to escalate beyond the division's ability to manage. The emergency protocols that had been activated would soon bring in outside specialists who would assume that the network failure represented either catastrophic damage or hostile action. Their response would be based on worst-case assumptions. That would result in weeks of system rebuilding that could have been avoided with proper diagnosis of the actual problem. The moment of decision came when Sarah observed Dr. Park preparing to authorize the complete shutdown of the remaining network systems to prevent potential data compromise. The action would have made recovery even more difficult and would have confirmed the assumption that CyberNet Alpha had suffered irreparable damage. Sarah realized that she had to act, regardless of the organizational barriers that had previously prevented her from contributing to the crisis response. The technical knowledge that she had accumulated through 3 years of routine support work was about to be tested in the most challenging circumstances possible. The quiet competence that had been invisible to her colleagues was about to be revealed as the specialized expertise needed to resolve a crisis that threatened to compromise national security. The woman who had been dismissed as just technical support was about to demonstrate that her understanding of the Pentagon's digital infrastructure was more comprehensive and valuable than anyone had imagined. Sarah rose from her cubicle with the kind of quiet determination that had carried her through situations far more dangerous than a network crisis. The chaos around her was escalating as senior analysts struggled with increasingly complex diagnostic procedures, but she moved with the calm precision of someone who had identified the real problem and knew exactly how to solve it. Her worn canvas shoes made no sound on the polished floor as she walked directly toward the operations center where Dr. Lisa Park was coordinating the emergency response. The operations center was a hive of frantic activity. Multiple screens displayed cascading error messages and system diagnostics that painted a picture of complete network failure. Senior specialists huddled around workstations, their voices tense with the pressure of a crisis that had already consumed 5 hours without resolution. The air was thick with stress and the kind of desperate energy that comes from highly skilled professionals confronting a problem that seemed to defy their expertise. "Dr. Park," Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through the technical discussions with unexpected authority. "I need to show you something about the CyberNet Alpha failure." Dr. Park looked up from her screen, irritation flashing across her face. The last thing she needed was a technical support specialist offering suggestions during the most serious cybersecurity crisis in the Pentagon's recent history. "Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but this is a classified network emergency. The technical teams are handling it." "The network isn't damaged," Sarah continued, her tone remaining steady despite the dismissal. "It's in protective shutdown mode." The automated security protocols detected what they interpreted as a coordinated attack and initiated full isolation procedures. "The system is functioning normally, but it's refusing to allow connections because it believes the network has been compromised." The specificity of Sarah's analysis caused Dr. Park to pause. The technical details she was citing weren't the kind of information that would be available to routine support personnel. "How could you possibly know that?" "The diagnostic systems are part of the network that's down." Sarah moved closer to Dr. Park's workstation, her fingers already moving toward the keyboard. "I've been monitoring the security event logs through the administrative interface." The automated threat detection system logged a series of coordinated login attempts that exceeded the threshold for potential intrusion. The system interpreted normal user activity as a distributed attack pattern and triggered the nuclear option: complete network isolation. Before Dr. Park could respond, Sarah had pulled up a diagnostic interface that few people in the division even knew existed. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the fluid precision of someone who had spent countless hours navigating the Pentagon's most complex systems. The screen filled with log entries and system messages that revealed the true sequence of events leading to the network failure. "Here," Sarah said, pointing to a specific log entry. At 2:43 p.m., the system detected what it classified as coordinated authentication anomalies from 17 different user accounts. The timing pattern triggered the Advanced Persistent Threat Protocol, which automatically severed all network connections to prevent data exfiltration. Dr. Park leaned closer to the screen, her expression shifting from irritation to intense concentration. The diagnostic information that Sarah was displaying was incredibly detailed and technically sophisticated. "This interface requires Level 5 security clearance. How do you have access to these systems?" "Technical support personnel need diagnostic access to troubleshoot authentication issues," Sarah replied, her tone suggesting that the question was irrelevant to the immediate crisis. "The point is that the network failure was triggered by a false positive in the threat detection system. The 17 login attempts that triggered the shutdown were from users who were having routine password issues. The system interpreted their repeated login attempts as a coordinated attack." The implications of Sarah's analysis were staggering. The crisis that had mobilized dozens of senior specialists and threatened to disrupt military operations worldwide was the result of an automated security system that had misinterpreted routine user behavior as a sophisticated cyber attack. The network wasn't damaged, compromised, or under attack. It was simply following its programming to protect classified information from what it believed to be a coordinated intrusion attempt. Marcus Webb, who had been working frantically at a nearby workstation, overheard the conversation and approached with obvious skepticism. "That's impossible. The threat detection algorithms are designed to distinguish between normal user behavior and attack patterns. They wouldn't trigger a full network shutdown based on routine authentication issues." Sarah turned to face Webb, her expression calm but her voice carrying an edge of professional authority that he had never heard before. The algorithms are designed to detect patterns, but they're not programmed to account for the specific circumstances that occurred today. 17 users experienced password expiration issues simultaneously because of a scheduled security update that occurred last night. When they all attempted to log in within the same 30-minute window, the system identified it as a coordinated attack. She returned to the keyboard, pulling up additional diagnostic screens that revealed the exact sequence of events. The threat detection system is programmed to look for multiple authentication failures from different accounts occurring within a specific time frame. It's designed to catch distributed attacks where multiple compromised accounts are being used simultaneously. But it can't distinguish between malicious coordination and coincidental timing. The technical precision of Sarah's explanation was causing a fundamental shift in how the crisis was being understood. The senior specialists who had been treating the network failure as evidence of system damage or external attack were beginning to realize that they had been pursuing solutions to the wrong problem. The network wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed, but responding to a situation that its programming hadn't anticipated. Dr. Park was studying the diagnostic information with growing amazement. If you're right, then the solution isn't system repair or security countermeasures. We need to convince the automated protocols that the perceived threat was a false alarm and authorize network restart. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. But the override procedures are complex and require specific sequence authentication. The system is designed to resist restart attempts that might be part of the same attack that triggered the shutdown. We need to access the security management console and provide cryptographic proof that the restart request is legitimate. The conversation was attracting attention from other specialists in the operations center. Colonel Martinez had moved closer to observe the interaction, his security assessment background giving him insight into the significance of what he was witnessing. The quiet technical support specialist was demonstrating expertise in advanced network security. That was far beyond what her official position would suggest. Sarah was already navigating to the security management interface, her movements confident and purposeful. The override procedure requires simultaneous authentication from 3 different security domains. We need administrator credentials for the network management system, security clearance verification from the access control database, and cryptographic validation from the threat assessment protocols. The complexity of the procedure she was describing was extraordinary. The security management console was designed to be accessible only to the most senior cybersecurity specialists, and the override procedures required knowledge of protocols that were typically restricted to personnel with the highest security clearances. Yet Sarah was navigating these systems with the ease of someone who had extensive experience with their operation. Dr. Park watched in fascination as Sarah assembled the authentication credentials needed to access the override procedures. Where did you learn these protocols? This level of security management isn't covered in standard technical training. Sarah's response was matter-of-fact, her attention focused on the complex authentication sequence she was executing. You learn a lot about security protocols when you're responsible for troubleshooting authentication issues for 3 years. Every password reset, every account lockout, every security token problem teaches you something about how the systems actually work. The authentication process was proceeding smoothly, but Sarah's explanation was revealing the depth of expertise that she had developed through her supposedly routine support work. Her understanding of the Pentagon security architecture was comprehensive and detailed, extending far beyond what would be necessary for basic technical support. She was demonstrating knowledge of systems and procedures that most senior analysts understood only in theoretical terms. Colonel Martinez was watching the proceedings with intense interest. His security assessment had been designed to identify vulnerabilities in the division's cybersecurity operations But he was witnessing something far more significant. The revelation that the division's most capable cybersecurity specialist had been working in a position that completely underutilized her expertise. The override procedure was reaching its critical phase as Sarah accessed the threat assessment protocols that controlled the network's automated security responses. The system was requiring cryptographic validation that the restart request was legitimate and not part of an ongoing attack. The validation process involved complex mathematical calculations that would normally require specialized software and extensive technical knowledge. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard with remarkable speed and precision as she manually calculated the cryptographic keys needed to convince the security protocols that the restart request was legitimate. The mathematical complexity of the task was extraordinary, requiring her to perform calculations that would challenge even senior cybersecurity specialists with access to specialized tools. "The validation sequence is complete," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had successfully navigated one of the Pentagon's most complex security procedures. "The threat assessment protocols are ready to accept the restart authorization. We need to coordinate the sequence with the network management system to ensure that all security domains authenticate simultaneously." The coordination of the restart sequence required precise timing and comprehensive understanding of how the different security systems interacted with each other. Sarah was orchestrating a complex procedure that involved multiple classified systems, each with its own security protocols and authentication requirements. The level of expertise she was demonstrating was far beyond what anyone in the division had suspected she possessed. Dr. Park was assisting with the coordination, but she was clearly following Sarah's lead rather than directing the process. "I've never seen anyone navigate these systems with this level of expertise. Where did you develop this knowledge?" Sarah's response was focused on the immediate task rather than personal history. "The restart sequence needs to be initiated within the next 30 seconds or the authentication will expire. Are you ready to execute the network management authorization?" The moment of truth had arrived. The complex procedure that Sarah had orchestrated was about to be tested against the Pentagon's most sophisticated security systems. The network failure that had paralyzed military communications worldwide was about to be resolved through the expertise of someone who had been dismissed as just technical support for 3 years. The restart sequence executed flawlessly. System after system came back online as the automated security protocols accepted the cryptographic validation and authorized the restoration of network connectivity. The red warning displays that had dominated the operations center screens were replaced by green status indicators as CyberNet Alpha resumed normal operation. The crisis was over. The network failure that had threatened to disrupt military operations globally had been resolved through the expertise of someone whose capabilities had been completely unrecognized by the division's leadership. Sarah had demonstrated technical knowledge and problem-solving skills that were far beyond what anyone had expected from a Level 2 technical support specialist. But the resolution of the crisis had raised even more questions about who Sarah Chen really was and how she had developed the extraordinary expertise that had just saved the Pentagon's most critical communication systems. The quiet woman who had been taking routine support calls for 3 years had revealed herself to be one of the most capable cybersecurity specialists in the facility, and her true background was about to become the subject of intense scrutiny. Silence in the operations center was deafening as the final green status indicators appeared on the main display screens. CyberNet Alpha was fully operational, its classified communications channels restored, and the crisis that had threatened to paralyze military operations worldwide was over. But the successful resolution of the network failure had created a new problem that was far more complex than any technical malfunction. Everyone in the room was staring at Sarah Chen with expressions that ranged from confusion to amazement to something approaching awe. Colonel Martinez was the first to break the silence, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally solved a puzzle that had been troubling him for weeks. "Sarah, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer it honestly. What is your real background?" Sarah's hands were still resting on the keyboard, her breathing steady despite the intensity of the moment. She looked around the operations center at the faces of colleagues who had dismissed her capabilities for 3 years, understanding that her carefully maintained cover was about to be completely destroyed. The decision she had made to resolve the network crisis had been necessary to protect national security, but it had also revealed expertise that could never be explained by routine technical support experience. "I think you already know the answer to that question, Colonel," Sarah replied quietly, her voice carrying a weariness that suggested she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. "My official background is exactly what's in my personnel file. Everything else is classified at levels that I'm not authorized to discuss in this environment." Dr. Park, who had been studying the diagnostic screens that still displayed the complex procedures Sarah had used to restore the network, looked up with obvious fascination. "The security protocols you just executed, those aren't taught in any standard cybersecurity training program. The mathematical complexity of the cryptographic validation alone would require graduate-level expertise in computer science and years of specialized experience with classified systems." Marcus Webb, who had been watching the proceedings from his workstation, approached with an expression that mixed professional curiosity with personal embarrassment. "Sarah, the diagnostic techniques you use to identify the root cause of the network failure, those are advanced analytical methods that are typically restricted to senior intelligence analysts with top-secret clearances. How did you develop that level of expertise?" Sarah's response was careful and measured, reflecting her understanding that she was now the subject of intense scrutiny from people who had the authority to investigate her background thoroughly. "I've been working in cybersecurity for longer than my current position would suggest. The skills I use today were developed through previous assignments that involved similar systems and security protocols." The vague nature of her answer was frustrating to the specialists who were trying to understand how someone with her apparent expertise had been working in a Level 2 support position for 3 years. But Colonel Martinez recognized the careful phrasing of someone who was bound by security classifications that prevented her from discussing her true background openly. "Previous assignments," Martinez repeated, his tone suggesting that he understood the implications of her careful language. "Would those assignments have been with organizations that provide cover identities for personnel whose true backgrounds need to remain classified?" Sarah met his gaze directly, her expression acknowledging the accuracy of his assessment without providing verbal confirmation. "I'm not authorized to discuss the details of my previous employment, Colonel. What I can tell you is that I've been working in cybersecurity and network analysis for significantly longer than my current position would indicate." The revelation was causing a fundamental shift in how everyone in the operations center understood the events of the past few hours. The network crisis that had mobilized dozens of senior specialists had been resolved by someone whose true capabilities had been completely hidden from the division's leadership. The quiet technical support specialist who had been dismissed as just support staff had demonstrated expertise that was far beyond what most senior analysts possessed. Division Chief Anderson, who had been monitoring the crisis response from his office, arrived at the operations center to find his most critical network systems fully operational and his staff staring at Sarah with expressions of bewilderment. "Someone want to explain to me how we went from a complete network failure to full restoration in the space of 20 minutes. Dr. Park gestured toward Sarah, her voice carrying a mixture of respect and confusion. Sarah identified the root cause of the failure and executed the recovery procedures. The network wasn't damaged or under attack. It was in protective shutdown mode due to a false positive in the threat detection system. She navigated the override procedures and restored full connectivity. Anderson looked at Sarah with obvious skepticism. Technical support specialists don't have access to the security management console. Those systems require level 5 clearance and specialized training that takes years to complete. I have the necessary clearances, Sarah replied simply, her tone suggesting that this was a fact that could be easily verified through official channels. My current position doesn't require their use, but I've maintained the certifications in case they were needed for emergency situations. The implications of her statement were staggering. Maintaining level 5 security clearances required ongoing background investigations, regular security briefings, and demonstrated need for access to classified systems. The process was expensive and time-consuming, and it wasn't something that would be maintained for routine technical support personnel unless there were compelling reasons for them to have access to highly classified systems. Colonel Martinez was beginning to understand the true scope of what he had discovered. Sarah, the security assessment I've been conducting was designed to identify vulnerabilities in the division's cybersecurity operations. But I think I've identified something far more significant, a personnel allocation problem that has resulted in one of the most capable cybersecurity specialists in the facility being assigned to routine technical support duties. Sarah's response was measured and professional, but her colleagues could sense the underlying tension in her voice. My current assignment serves important purposes that may not be immediately apparent. Technical support provides comprehensive access to the division's systems and personnel, which can be valuable for certain types of analysis and monitoring. The careful phrasing of her response suggested that her assignment to technical support hadn't been the result of organizational oversight or bureaucratic inefficiency. She had been placed in her current position for reasons that were related to her specialized background and capabilities, not despite them. The routine support work that had seemed like a waste of her talents was actually providing cover for activities that required access to the division's complete digital infrastructure. Dr. Park was studying Sarah with newfound respect and curiosity. You've been monitoring the division's security posture from your support position. The comprehensive access you've had to our systems has given you intelligence about our vulnerabilities and operational procedures that wouldn't be available to specialists working within compartmentalized security clearances. Technical support interactions provide insight into human factors and operational security that are often invisible to analysts who focus on technical vulnerabilities. Sarah confirmed. Understanding how people actually use systems is essential for predicting how those systems might be compromised or exploited. The conversation was revealing layers of complexity that had been hidden beneath Sarah's routine support duties. Her position hadn't been limiting her capabilities. It had been providing her with unique access to information that was essential for comprehensive security analysis. The 3 years she had spent solving password problems and troubleshooting software issues had actually been an extended intelligence-gathering operation that had given her unprecedented insight into the division's security posture. Marcus Webb was beginning to understand the implications of what he had witnessed. The technical insights you've provided over the past 3 years, your solutions to network problems, your identification of security vulnerabilities, your recommendations for system improvements, those weren't just good technical support. They were intelligence analysis based on your comprehensive understanding of our operational security. Sarah's confirmation was subtle but unmistakable. Effective technical support requires understanding not just how systems work, but why they fail and how those failures might be exploited. The problems I've solved have provided valuable intelligence about the division's security strengths and vulnerabilities. The revelation was causing everyone in the operations center to reevaluate their understanding of Sarah's role and capabilities. The quiet woman who had been dismissed as just support staff had been conducting sophisticated intelligence analysis while maintaining the cover of routine technical duties. Her comprehensive understanding of the division's digital infrastructure had been developed through an extended, covert operation that had given her access to information that would have been impossible to gather through conventional analysis. Colonel Martinez was impressed by the sophistication of the operation and the quality of the intelligence that Sarah had been gathering. Your assessment of the division's security posture is probably more comprehensive than any formal audit could provide. You've had access to information about human factors, operational procedures, and system vulnerabilities that would normally be distributed across multiple security classifications. The intelligence value of technical support interactions is often underestimated, Sarah replied. People reveal more about their security practices and system usage when they're asking for help than they do during formal security briefings or assessment interviews. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of additional personnel who had been summoned to investigate the network crisis. Senior officials from the Pentagon cybersecurity leadership were entering the operations center, expecting to find evidence of system damage or foreign attack. Instead, they found a fully operational network and a group of specialists trying to understand how their most serious cybersecurity crisis had been resolved by someone whose true capabilities had been completely unknown to them. The questions that would follow would be complex and far-reaching. Sarah's demonstration of advanced cybersecurity expertise had revealed the existence of a covert operation that had been conducted within the Cyber Defense Division for 3 years. The intelligence she had gathered about the division's security posture would need to be analyzed and acted upon. The organizational changes that would be required to properly utilize her capabilities would need to be implemented, but the immediate crisis had been resolved, and the Pentagon's most critical communication systems were fully operational. The network failure that had threatened to disrupt military operations worldwide had been fixed by someone whose expertise had been hidden in plain sight, working in a position that had given her unprecedented access to the information needed to protect national security. The quiet technical support specialist, who had been dismissed as just support staff, had revealed herself to be one of the most valuable intelligence assets in the Pentagon's cybersecurity operations. Her true background and the nature of her covert assignment would soon become the subject of intense investigation and analysis, but her contribution to national security had already been demonstrated in the most dramatic way possible. The transformation in the operations center was immediate and profound. The same colleagues who had dismissed Sarah as just technical support now stood in respectful silence as the implications of her demonstrated expertise sank in. Division Chief Anderson, who had arrived expecting to manage a catastrophic network failure, found himself facing a completely different kind of crisis, the realization that his most capable cybersecurity specialist had been working undercover for 3 years without his knowledge. Marcus Webb was the first to approach Sarah directly. His face flushed with embarrassment as he remembered the countless jokes and dismissive comments he had made about her capabilities. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. We all do. The things I said about your work, about technical support being like digital janitors. I was completely wrong about your abilities and your contributions to this division." Sarah's response was gracious but professional, reflecting the maturity of someone who had endured far worse treatment than workplace mockery. "You weren't wrong about technical support, Marcus. You were just unaware that my role involved more than routine troubleshooting." The dismissive comments were based on incomplete information, not personal malice. Dr. Park stepped forward, her expression mixing respect with curiosity about the true scope of Sarah's background. "The expertise you demonstrated today, the security protocols, the cryptographic analysis, the comprehensive understanding of our network architecture, represents years of specialized training and operational experience. Where did you develop these capabilities?" Sarah's answer was carefully measured, reflecting her understanding that she was now the subject of intense scrutiny from people who had the authority to investigate her background thoroughly. I've been working in cybersecurity and intelligence analysis for 12 years, the last 3 of which have been spent in this division. My assignment to technical support was designed to provide comprehensive access to the division's systems and personnel while maintaining operational security. The revelation sent ripples of understanding through the group of specialists who had gathered around her. The quiet woman who had been solving their password problems had actually been conducting a sophisticated intelligence operation that had given her unprecedented insight into the division's operational security. Her routine support duties had been providing cover for activities that required access to every system and every person in the facility. Colonel Martinez, who had been observing the proceedings with the satisfaction of someone whose suspicions had been confirmed, stepped forward with obvious respect. "Sarah, the security assessment I've been conducting has identified numerous vulnerabilities in our cybersecurity operations. But I suspect your 3-year covert analysis has produced intelligence that's far more comprehensive than any formal audit could provide. The intelligence value of technical support interactions is extraordinary," Sarah confirmed, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years analyzing human behavior and security practices. People reveal more about their actual security practices, their system usage patterns, and their vulnerability to social engineering when they're requesting help than they do during formal security briefings or ASSESSM-ENT interviews. The implications of her statement were staggering for the specialists who were beginning to understand the true scope of her intelligence gathering operation. Every password reset, every software installation, every troubleshooting session had provided Sarah with information about the division's security posture that would have been impossible to gather through conventional analysis methods. Dr. Park was studying Sarah with newfound respect and professional curiosity. "Your solutions to technical problems over the past 3 years, they weren't just efficient troubleshooting. They were intelligence analysis based on your comprehensive understanding of our operational security, vulnerabilities, and human factors. Effective security analysis requires understanding not just how systems work, but how people actually use them," Sarah replied. "The gap between official security protocols and actual user behavior is often where the most serious vulnerabilities exist. My support role provided direct access to information about those gaps that would have been difficult to obtain through formal security assessments." The conversation was attracting attention from additional personnel who had been summoned to investigate the network crisis. Senior officials from the Pentagon cybersecurity leadership were arriving to find that the emergency they had expected to manage had been resolved, but that the resolution had revealed the existence of a covert operation that had been conducted within their division for 3 years. General Patricia Hawkins, the Pentagon's Director of Cybersecurity Operations, entered the operations center with the brisk efficiency of someone who expected to find evidence of system damage or foreign attack. Instead, she found a fully operational network and a group of specialists surrounding someone she didn't recognize, but who was clearly the center of intense attention. "Someone want to explain to me how we went from a code red security incident to full network restoration in under an hour?" General Hawkins demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who was accustomed to immediate and comprehensive answers. Division Chief Anderson stepped forward, his expression reflecting the complexity of the situation he was about to explain. Generally, the network failure was resolved by technical support specialist Sarah Chen, who identified the root cause as a false positive in our automated threat detection system and executed the recovery procedures using security protocols that required Level 5 clearance. General Hawkins looked at Sarah with obvious confusion and growing interest. "Technical support specialists don't have Level 5 clearance or access to security management consoles. Those systems require specialized training and operational experience that takes years to develop. I have the necessary clearances and training, General, Sarah replied calmly, her tone suggesting that this was information that could be easily verified through official channels. My assignment to technical support was designed to provide comprehensive access to the division systems, while maintaining operational security for activities that required detailed knowledge of our network architecture and personnel practices. The careful phrasing of Sarah's response immediately caught General Hawkins' attention. As someone who had spent decades in military intelligence, she recognized the language of someone who was operating under classified assignment parameters. Are you telling me that you've been conducting a covert intelligence operation within this division for 3 years? I'm telling you that my assignment has involved activities that required access to information that would have been difficult to obtain through conventional security analysis methods, Sarah replied, her response providing confirmation without revealing specific operational details. Colonel Martinez stepped forward to provide additional context. General, I've been conducting a comprehensive security assessment of this division's operations. My observations of Sarah's work patterns and capabilities led me to suspect that her technical competence was far beyond what her official position would suggest. Today's network crisis provided confirmation that she possesses expertise in advanced cybersecurity and network analysis that is far superior to most senior specialists. General Hawkins was beginning to understand the implications of what she was hearing. You're suggesting that one of our most capable cybersecurity specialists has been working undercover as technical support staff, conducting intelligence analysis, while maintaining the appearance of routine technical duties. The intelligence value of the technical support role is often underestimated, Sarah confirmed. 3 years of routine interactions with every person and system in this division has provided comprehensive insight into our security posture, operational procedures, and vulnerability patterns that would have been impossible to gather through formal assessment methods. The revelation was causing a fundamental shift in how everyone understood the events of the past few hours and the past 3 years. The network crisis that had mobilized dozens of senior specialists had been resolved by someone whose true capabilities had been deliberately concealed from the division's leadership. The quiet technical support specialist who had been dismissed as just support staff had been conducting sophisticated intelligence analysis while maintaining perfect operational security. Dr. Park was studying the diagnostic screens that still displayed the complex procedures Sarah had used to restore the network. The security protocols you executed today required not just technical knowledge, but comprehensive understanding of how our systems interact with each other and how the automated security responses function. That level of expertise could only have been developed through years of specialized training and operational experience. My background includes 12 years of cybersecurity and intelligence analysis, with specializations in network architecture, threat assessment, and operational security, Sarah replied, her tone suggesting that this information was now available for official verification. The last 3 years have been spent analyzing this division's security posture through comprehensive access to systems and personnel that my technical support role provided. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of additional senior officials who had been summoned to investigate what they believed would be evidence of catastrophic system failure or foreign attack. Instead, they found a fully operational network and growing awareness that a covert intelligence operation had been conducted within the Cyber Defense Division for 3 years. The questions that followed were complex and far-reaching. Sarah's demonstration of advanced cybersecurity expertise had revealed not just individual competence, but the existence of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been gathering information about the division's security posture while maintaining perfect operational security. The intelligence she had collected would need to be analyzed and acted upon. The organizational changes required to properly utilize her capabilities would need to be implemented, but the immediate recognition was clear and unanimous. The same colleagues who had mocked her useless job now understood that her work had been essential for protecting national security. The technical support role that had seemed like a waste of talent had actually provided the perfect cover for intelligence analysis that was far more valuable than any formal security assessment. Marcus Webb approached Sarah with obvious respect and continued embarrassment. "Sarah, I don't know how to apologize for 3 years of dismissive comments and jokes about your capabilities. You've been protecting our security while we treated you like you were incompetent." "You weren't treating me like I was incompetent," Sarah replied with quiet dignity. "You were responding to the role I was playing and the information you were given. The operational security of my assignment required that my true capabilities remain hidden from personnel who didn't need to know about them." The gracious nature of her response only increased the respect that her colleagues were developing for her professionalism and character. She had endured 3 years of dismissive treatment while conducting critical intelligence work, and her response to the revelation of her true capabilities showed the maturity and wisdom that had made her covert operation successful. General Hawkins was preparing to initiate the formal procedures that would be required to analyze Sarah's intelligence findings and determine how to properly utilize her capabilities. "Sarah, the intelligence you've gathered about this division's security posture will need to be comprehensively debriefed and analyzed. The organizational changes that will be required to address the vulnerabilities you've identified will need to be implemented systematically. I have detailed documentation of my findings and recommendations," Sarah replied, her tone suggesting that she had been preparing for this moment throughout her 3-year assignment. "The intelligence includes analysis of human factors, technical vulnerabilities, and operational security issues that affect the division's ability to protect classified information and maintain network security." The transformation was complete. The quiet woman who had been dismissed as just technical support had revealed herself to be one of the Pentagon's most valuable intelligence assets. Her covert operation had provided comprehensive insight into the division's security posture. That would be essential for protecting national security. The colleagues who had mocked her capabilities now understood that her work had been far more important than their own, and that her quiet competence had been protecting them while they remained unaware of the true scope of her contributions. Network crisis had been resolved, but the revelation of Sarah's true capabilities had created opportunities for organizational improvements that would strengthen the division's cybersecurity operations for years to come. The woman who had been hidden in plain sight had demonstrated that the most valuable contributions to national security often come from people whose true capabilities remain invisible until the moment when they are needed most. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood before a packed auditorium at the Pentagon, no longer wearing the gray uniform of technical support, but the crisp dress blues of a newly promoted cybersecurity division chief. The audience included many of the same colleagues who had once dismissed her as just support staff, now listening intently as she outlined the division's new security protocols based on her 3-year covert analysis. "The greatest threats to our national security," Sarah said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had always been there, "often come not from sophisticated foreign adversaries, but from our own assumptions about the people around us and the work they do." Dr. Park, now serving as Sarah's deputy, smiled from the front row. Marcus Webb, who had become one of Sarah's strongest advocates, was taking detailed notes on her presentation. Colonel Martinez, whose security assessment had helped reveal Sarah's true capabilities, nodded approvingly as she described the intelligence value of comprehensive human factor analysis that the division's security posture had been transformed by. Sarah's findings: network vulnerabilities had been addressed, personnel training had been enhanced, and new protocols had been implemented that accounted for the gap between official procedures and actual user behavior. The improvements were already showing results. Attempted intrusions were being detected faster, security breaches were being prevented more effectively, and the division's overall cybersecurity rating had improved dramatically. Sarah's story had become legend within the Pentagon cybersecurity community, but she remained focused on the work rather than the recognition. Her true measure of success wasn't the promotion or the respect she now received, but the knowledge that her covert operation had made American military communications more secure. As she concluded her presentation, Sarah's final words carried the wisdom of someone who had learned to see past surface appearances. Remember that the person solving your password problems might be the same person protecting your national security. If this story of hidden heroism and quiet service resonates with you, there are countless other inspiring tales of people whose true capabilities remain hidden until the moment they're needed most. Like and subscribe to discover more stories about the extraordinary people who protect and serve in ways that often go unrecognized. Hit that notification bell to never miss stories about the real heroes working behind the scenes to keep us safe.